We're back for the 10th episode of Voices New Eden. Back in November, when I started putting this project together, 10 was my goal number. Why 10? It seemed achievable to find at least 10 of you who would agree to be interviewed. Well, what if I told you I have enough episodes ready to go every Sunday until the end of April, and I'm still getting 3 to 4 interviews booked a week? Needless to say, I think you're going to have a lot to look forward to going forward. Now, to this week's episode. I've gotten a few requests for players who live in low-sec. While I haven't found some non-faction warfare low-sec folk to interview yet, I do have someone who allies with the Garista Pirates. I don't want to give away too much more, so sit back, relax, and let's get into this interview.
I'm Heathspliff. That's generally how I'm known in the EVE community. More recently, I have a character called King Trumpet, who's the director of a Garista's Insurgency Corp, which I'm sure we'll go into later. I've been playing EVE for nearly 2 years now. It's something I've been interested in quite a while. I've watched various videos, read into it. It's always kind of quite fascinated me, but it seemed kind of impenetrable to get into, which I don't think is actually true when you get down to it. But what happened is it was the run-up to Zelda Tears of the Kingdom being released, and I needed some game to play for about 4 weeks to kind of distract me until this game came out that I was really looking forward to. So the story is that release day came. I went out, I went to pick up my copy, I got back, I played it a couple of times, and then just went back to EVE because that's all I wanted to do, and I've been playing it ever since. So I've always been really interested in space. Any game set in space, anything that's kind of futuristic, is really attractive to me. I much prefer to be flying around space in a spaceship than to be running around on the ground with like a sword, fighting goblins or whatever. That's kind of just more my cup of tea. And also the single shard nature of EVE, the fact that there is, if we exclude, the Chinese server and the test server, obviously it's a single shard MMO, and that I think makes for a really living, breathing world in a way that other MMOs don't. If you're in RuneScape, for example, which is a great game, it's not really my thing, but in RuneScape you can kind of server hop, you can, I'm going to go to this server, and this server's doing its own thing. In EVE, there's one server and that's it, and it's kind of, our home, and there's no like escaping it, there's no other EVE to go to. And I find kind of like big concepts in gaming that I feel kind of like take the art form forwards really cool, and yeah, EVE delivers on that. So when I first started out, I was really into PvE. I would say I probably still am, to a large extent. That's more my preferred form of gameplay. I did a lot of wormhole diving, which was that's running C3s, C3 ratting. When you're pretty new to the game, if you can make it out alive, it's a lot of risk. It's very rewarding. It's very scary as well. I kind of like the PvE VP aspect to that as well. Usually I died, but the first time I managed to fight off some attackers in a wormhole that was, by far and away one of the most satisfying experiences I've had in the game. Over time, I played a lot of level 4 missions. I really like being able to just kind of chill out in high sec and just face down dozens of enemies and kind of shoot them down one by one. I find that a lot of fun, and I like coming up with little like fleets as well to take on L4 missions. So usually I run them with like a main and a battleship, and then a booster or a logi, and then I have a separate account for doing salvaging as well. I really like Abyssal Dead Space. I'm not friends with it today because I lost the blinged up ship that I'd only just bought. Which was, yeah, that was a whole thing. But I've spent plenty of time in the Abyss. I think it's probably the best sort of PvE experience in the game at the moment. I think it's a really excellent piece of game design, and if you can put kind of the time and attention into it, it's very rewarding. I have co-founded, I guess, a corp alongside, well, as part of Eve Rookies, which is Eve Rookies Rabbit Rebellion, and we are a Garusta faction warfare insurgency corp. This started with me like 6 months ago, creating a character, and I've been running in the insurgency first solo and then with a different corp that I was just a line member of, and I've really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the few PvP activities in the game which has a good balance between being fun but also being paying for itself in terms of the ISK that you can earn, probably more than pays it for itself actually. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun setting up this corp, coming up with the doctrines, coming up with the skill plans, trying to sort of, for the lack of a better word, market it, trying to get people in there, and the response has been great. I definitely, I dare say I couldn't have done it without the help that you guys at Eve Rookies have given me. But I think we've got a few dozen members already. We've got plenty of people turning up with fleets. More than enough for the kind of numbers that we need, and the sky's the limit. I think more and more people are kind of dripping in, and I think that the insurgency is something that is quite mystifying to people who aren't familiar with it. They're not quite sure where to start. And with Rabbit Rebellion, I've been trying to give them a kind of sort of ground zero in terms of, we can take anyone and we'll show you how to make a success out of engaging with this gameplay. So that's been really rewarding. When I first started playing, I kind of knocked around different high set corps. I was never in one for a particularly long period. I was kind of trying out different things. Eventually, I wanted to try going out to nullsec, and that started a sort of what I think is going to be a lifelong alignment with the Goon Swarm and the Imperium. So I joined Karma Fleet. I moved out to Null. And I lived in Dell for a while. I did that whole thing. Decided in the long run it wasn't for me. And then I ended up coming back to high sec. Originally, I was in Karma Fleet University, which is Karma Fleet's high sec corp. That closed down, so I'm now in Ascendance Rising, which is another Goon Swarm Fleet corp, high sec corp. And again, like a Karma Fleet unit, it's non-war deckable, so you can be in high set, you can still be aligned with the Imperium, but you aren't war decked, which is really good because it kind of opens up what you're able to do in high sec. That's on my main characters anyway. On my Garista character, obviously, I'm in Rabbit Rebellion. We are a fully Garista cult. We're and enlisted with the Gristers. So as soon as you join, you are enlisted. So for that reason, we've been saying to people, don't join with your mains, and indeed, that's what I've been doing. So yeah, my main is basically with extra steps is still in the Imperium. Okay, so I've been playing about 6 months. My experience with the onboarding was really good. It did take quite a while to process my application, which is kind of a common complaint. But I think there's good reasons for that, and I fully respect all the people who are volunteering their time to keep Calm Fleet running. So I don't mind that too much, and also whilst I was waiting, they let me join Calm Fleet University, so I could do stuff with them until I moved out. Um, when I did actually go out there, they paid for me to move my assets down to nullsec. They gave me some starter ships. You could get some other freebies. There was like a wealth of information. If anything, kind of too much information. The forum and the wiki has got so many resources on there. It's kind of overwhelming at first. There was quite a lot to do in terms of setting up different services, like setting up Mumble, and the various kind of sort of intranet, for lack of a better word, sites that they have. Um, so it was, quite a lot of work to get set up, but the technology almost always worked really well, and they were very helpful. So I feel that I had a good onboarding experience with them. I think that the game is lacking in um, modern PvE content, at least to an extent. I think like Abyssal Dead Space is, like I said before, it's very good content. One thing I miss is that the game doesn't have more of that. Um, I think that it's not the biggest game in the world, and I can see why. Obviously they don't have unlimited budget to work with, but in terms of PvP content in Eve. The gameplay is very emergent. The players create the content themselves. And Eve definitely delivers on that. On PvE, I feel that as an MMO, Eve Online is a bit left behind. I feel that it could do with some more content, a bit of a modernization of what's already there. So, for example, if you take something like Incursions, which is, I don't think I mentioned this before, but that's content that I really got into, not so much these days, but in general over time, like I've definitely run a lot of Incursions. If you could take something like that, fleet content, but then combine that with the sort of unpredictability and the variety of like Abyssal Dead Space, that could make some really interesting content. Because ultimately, if you think about it, incursions are a raid. Generally, raids in an MMO are refreshed every 1 to 2 years. But in Eve, they have granted new content's been added, but incursions haven't been refreshed, and it's basically the same content as 13 years ago, which I think is a bit of a shame. So I know that Eve Online's more of a PvP focused game, and I'm probably going to be in the minority, in my view, but that's my take on it. Yeah, it's been really good. I haven't had anything to do with running a court before, so I am impressed with a lot of the tools that CCP have made available in the game. Um, I've really enjoyed, even though it's been quite a lot of work, I've really enjoyed putting, research and trial and error into coming up with different fits and skill plans, different doctrines, all of which were kind of it took my experience of being flying in the insurgency over the last 6 months. That all kind of fed into that. Plus, in terms of we're based out of Zarzak, and Zarzak geographically is kind of on an island surrounded by sharks. So that's a whole consideration: is how do we stage out of these shark infested waters, as it were. So I've kind of had to think how we work around that as well. Um, but going out on fleet, the people, through Eve Rookies, they've been great. They've been really nice. It's been really nice to see how engaged they are, as well as running fleets. Have been running classes as well, and plenty of people have turned up to those classes. People are really willing to learn about this content before taking part in it, which I think for insurgencies is really worthwhile. And people joining the corp every day. So and we're starting to make decent amount of this and decent amounts of fun as well, of course, out on fleet. So yeah, it's been really good. At the moment, in the Gurista insurgency, in other faction warfare militias, but it does seem to be worse in the Gurista insurgency, we do have an AWOXing problem. What I would say is that essentially, for some corporations that don't really care anyone else about anyone else in the militia, and don't have any loyalty to the militia as a whole, their path of least resistance to make more ISK for themselves is to AWOX, which of course means destroying players on your own side, on your own militia. And the game is set up in such a way that the consequences for doing so are minuscule. So yeah, like I say, it's a path of least resistance. I don't think they're absolutely dedicated to AWOXing, but because the game facilitates it, unfortunately, it does happen. And I've certainly experienced it. I think if you're sensible, you can avoid it. But I've heard more than once that people get killed by their own side more than they do the enemy. That's not my personal experience, but yeah, I've heard that at least once. So there are various solutions that have been thrown about by myself and others. I don't think anything's a silver bullet, and I don't think that anything will have the effect of completely removing AWOXing. However, I don't think you'd want that anyway, because you do want that option that if someone in your own militia is being a nightmare, because at the end of the day, these militias, they kind of act like almost like an NPC corp, even though they're not a corporation, they're a militia. But what I mean is that there's no disciplinary routes within the militia. We kind of have to police it ourselves, as it were. Um, but there's things that I believe could, if you just tip the scale just a little bit and make it so that it wasn't profitable to AWOX in the same way, I think that would be enough 99% of the time. So there could be some kind of financial penalty. For example, if you attack someone in your militia, you could be excluded from receiving LP for a certain amount of time. You could potentially have some kind of debuff, some kind of timer maybe that prevents you docking up or, makes it sort of really painful to be someone who's just done some AWOXing. There could be something similar to a Concord response. So, quite simply, if you shoot someone in your militia, you get either like one-shotted, like Concord do, or at least NPC ships turn up to fight you. Even if you don't get one-shotted, it would be enough that rather than fighting your own team, you're then having to focus on fighting off these NPC ships. I think that might be enough. And I think more importantly, and what probably needs to happen alongside any of those solutions, is to rethink how we deal with standings. At the moment, the simplest way to address that, I guess, would be to increase the standings loss for AWOXing in the militias. That would mean that people wouldn't want to AWOX to themselves because it would bring down the personal standings, but it also ultimately bring down corp average standings as well, if the penalty was a bit higher. So again, I think, if that was just tweaked a little bit, that could tip the scales. I think that if you're playing Eve, what I would suggest is really try everything it has to offer. That's one of the best things about Eve is it's like 10 games in one. And there's really good content out there that most people haven't experienced. So I say, if you play Eve, try and see it all if you can. Try and sample, everything. And see if you like it. If you don't, then that's okay. But definitely give it a go. So this is definitely a self plug here. But if you haven't tried faction warfare, you haven't tried being in insurgency, maybe you've only done an empire militia in the past, come fly with us and Rabbit Rebellion. Provide a starter guide that will guide you through everything you need up to the point from creating a new character, new alt, through to being ready to go out on fleet. But yeah, if you haven't tried wormholing, try wormholing. If you haven't tried running dead spaces, running abyssals, run abyssals, give it all a go, I think.
And now you have a little insight on how a player goes from being a line member to running an activity in a large and thriving organization. This is one of the things I am really proud about in Eve Rookies. We have the room for players to come and say, hey, I want to try running something. As long as what they want to try is reasonable, and it's not going to fall back in my lap, we let them go for it. In this case, I really can't be prouder. The concept of Eve Rookies and faction warfare has really taken off, and Heath is doing a fabulous job. If you'd like to come out and give him a hand, or just experience pirate faction warfare, roll up an alt and throw it into Eve Rookies Rabbit Rebellion. And no, I am not ashamed at the self-promotion. As always, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me and listening to the interview. If you'd be kind enough to give the video a like, it really does help get it to players who may be unaware that this whole thing exists. And of course, subscribing will help make sure that you get notified about future episodes. With that being said, I'm Kshal Aideron, and this was the 10th episode of Voices of New Eden.